Happy Halloween, everyone! To finish off this month of spoopiness, I knew that I had to go out with a bang, so I figured, what better of a way than with a title like this one? Yes, Eternal Darkness was considered to be an underrated classic by many, as well as an unusual title for the platform itself, considering Nintendo's direct involvement with it. Multiple attempts at a sequel or spiritual successor were attempted, but they all failed for one reason or another, leaving this to be one of the last horror titles that Nintendo would ever produce, outside of Fatal Frame, Maiden of Black Water for the Wii U. But 17 years was quite a long time ago. Tastes change, as do gameplay elements, technology, the market, the economics behind it, and beyond. So how did this one do? Let's not waste any more time and find out just how well Eternal Darkness for the Nintendo Gamecube holds up today.
Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting.
And with that famous quote, we begin. Developed by Silicon Knights and directly published by Nintendo, Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem is a psychological thriller, paying homage to all kinds of survival horror greats. Alexandra Roivas is woken up from a strange nightmare by a phone call. Police ask her to come down to her grandfather, Edward Roivas' mansion, to identify his body after a brutal murder. The nature of his death leaves police puzzled, and it's up to Alex to solve the mystery of his death. Now, if I stopped there and asked you what you thought based on those simple plot details, you'd be forgiven for thinking that you're about to play another Resident Evil Alone in the Dark clone, as there are many out there. But no, this is something quite different. After solving a clock puzzle, Alex discovers her grandfather's study, as well as a mysterious book called the Tome of Eternal Darkness, with missing pages in it. The book chronicles humanity's struggle against the forces of darkness, dating all the way back from 26 BC to present time, which was the year 2000 AD in the game. Each page you discover actually represents a chapter of the game itself, with stages based on various points in history. Each one of these has you playing a different character from said point in time, while collecting various items, weapons, magic, and most importantly, knowledge with which to fight against the darkness. Quite literally, a tale for the ages. Instead of trying to hit you with a bunch of boo scares like most of its contemporaries, Eternal Darkness leaves you with an unsettling atmosphere at all times, complete with strange sounds, whispers, creaking floors, door knocking, and all kinds of other things to mess with your head. Well, okay, the game did have one boo scare, thanks to a scene in a bathroom which shall remain nameless, but that was about it. As you are brought to each stage, you are given the date and location, and an introduction to the character you're going to play as, along with their goals and motivations, before they too discover the tome, and things begin to escalate. Each stage gives you weapons and items that are accurate to the time period they are taking place in. Although each level plays out about the same way, the actual characters do not. While one may be proficient with a sword or a projectile in one chapter, another may be weak but fast-moving, or slow but extremely strong, etc. This helps not only to balance the gameplay, but adds to the personality of each individual character as well. The majority of these people are not warriors, just individuals who happen to get caught up in one of the deadliest wars of all mankind. No pressure. The story is a tragic one, and yet inspiring all the same. True courage is not simply being afraid of nothing. It is choosing to do what is necessary despite that overwhelming fear inside of you. That is what makes each of these characters so great. They're choosing to move forward despite the horrifying nature of what they are fighting against. I was particularly impressed with Anthony in the third chapter, fighting against all odds just to protect his king, Charlemagne. And who could forget the noble efforts of Paul Luther, a simple monk tricked into coming to an evil chapel, forced to do almost everything alone in order to learn about and expose the horrible cults within. And then there's Alex herself, of course, who has to take on the entire responsibility of every past generation before her, and finish what was started so long ago. The gameplay formula is a bit complex, but is slowly introduced to you throughout multiple chapters, so as not to overwhelm you. Well, at least not in this one particular field. You can walk or run in all directions, use an equipped weapon with A, select a door, item, or point of interest with B, cast spell shortcuts with X, Y, and the D-pad, and even target an enemy's arms, torso, or head with the R button. You also have a menu screen for using and equipping items and weapons, a map screen, a screen for setting up and casting various spells, a screen for looking up various information about the world and creatures you encounter, and a settings menu for changing your video and audio, as well as saving and loading. The game will allow you to save almost anywhere at any time, but only so long as there are no enemies nearby. Actually casting spells can feel like a chore if there are enemies around you, as you cannot move while casting them. On one hand, this does increase the intensity of the game a bit, as some spells are required for game completion, but on the other hand, it also creates many frustrating situations where being off by just a second can screw up your spell, and still make you lose magic from your meter, regardless of whether or not it worked. You can refill it slowly by moving around, but this is also a very tedious process. The difficulty of this game will vary depending on which of the 3 artifacts you pick during the game's first chapter with Pius Augustus. Green is considered to be the easiest, while blue is the middle difficulty, and red is the hardest. Beating the game with all 3 allows you to unlock a secret ending, as well as the ability to select whatever chapters you want, and even skip cutscenes you viewed previously. The game's camera is fixed, so you never have to worry about moving it. This is both a good and bad thing simultaneously. On one hand, the camera angles presented are usually excellent and only add to the suspense even more. On the other hand, they do have their share of problems. There are plenty of times where I found myself unable to gauge if an attack of mine would reach an enemy due to a pillar or wall being in front of me, with no easy way to fix it other than moving far enough out of the way for the camera to adjust. There are also extremely narrow hallways in the game, and while they definitely look cool and disorienting, they also contribute to some frustrating combat situations in which your character may swing a weapon, only for it to keep getting caught against a wall and not reaching the enemy in time before it attacks you. You eventually have to take care of up to 3 meters. The first is your health, the second your magic, and finally your sanity. Yes, this sanity meter and sanity effects are among some of the most important and fascinating aspects of the game. When your meter is low enough, the camera will suddenly become more slanted and disjointed, while the music goes away and you begin to hear things like muffled cries, banging on the walls and doors, screaming, and other disorienting factors. You also have a chance of encountering what's called a sanity effect, leaving you open to all kinds of tricks, some designed to make your character question reality, and others designed to make the player do the same. Some particularly surprising ones for me included the game tricking me into thinking I had hit the reset button by putting the Edgar Allan Poe quote up on the screen, a sequence where an old TV volume control screen appeared and started to drop until the sound was muted, an animation designed to make you think your TV got turned off, and some players are unlucky enough to encounter one that tries to claim it's deleting all of your save files. Talk about frightening.
This can't be happening.
Each time you encounter an enemy, it drains a bit of your sanity meter, inching you closer to the sanity effects. Defeating enemies gives you an opportunity to also finish them off, returning some of your sanity to you after the fact. This was clearly designed to encourage not running away, and in most cases, at least with me, it worked, at least before unlocking the spell that allows you to bring it back up yourself. I was also impressed by the way this title would try to change things up, even as you were nearing about 3/4 of its completion. By chapter 9 out of 12, the last thing I would have expected was a boss fight encounter, and yet there it was, introducing yet another new method of fighting and strategy. The enemy that you face here, as well as the one you encounter near the end of the game, is all determined by the artifact you pick at the beginning once again. It doesn't affect the story majorly, but each encounter will feel a little different as far as gameplay goes. On top of the amazing sounds and music that keep you on your toes at all times, the voice acting in this game is top-notch.
You are a fool for trying to save him, Anthony. His fate was decided many centuries ago, as is the fate of this world. Despite your faith, there is little to save you from the power of Xenomorph.
The character models are also surprisingly detailed and expressive. I could literally feel the state of dread and horror coming from most of them as I went on. Nothing ever felt too out of place or silly, just straight up creepy and enthralling as a result of it. The environments also came alive in ways I wouldn't have expected, and I'm pretty sure the image of the doomed souls under your feet here will stick with me for the rest of my life. It is not a perfect game, however. As I said above, the camera can lead to numerous problems if you're not careful with it. It'll also put you in some unfair situations at times, leading you to getting thrown into a corner with no way of escaping until it's already too late, and you have to reload your last save point. Enemy variety could have also been better. While I do like the types that we got, I don't feel like there are nearly enough of them throughout the course of this impressively long game. The combat is also likely to start feeling repetitive to those who play it for long stretches of time. Outside of the new spells you continue to learn, there's not much else to look forward to as far as gameplay enhancements go. While many will rightfully consider this to be a vast improvement over the limitations of the tank control scheme seen in many previous 3D survival horror titles, it's not likely to impress beyond that outside of the unique sanity meter system. There's also some repetition near the final chapters of the game, as both Edward Roivas' chapter and the final chapter with Alex involve you running around a large area in order to activate a 9-point magical circle. While not particularly hard, it was very time-consuming, and it dragged on considerably, while all I wanted to do was reach the end and fight the final battle. Still, it's hard not to be impressed by the entire package overall, even today. Each chapter feels like its own special game, albeit using the same engine. There was never a point that made me feel like I wanted to stop or give up. I simply had to know how this story was going to end, especially with all of the hype building up to this over the course of those 1,974 years or so. I was more than satisfied with the way everything ended, and I didn't feel any regrets over the time I spent with it. Even with the gameplay flaws I mentioned before, the good far outweighs it, with a gripping story, amazing and creepy atmosphere, excellent voice acting, and cinematic camera angles that pull you all the way in. As you can see, this is yet another example of a game with noticeable flaws that I still fully recommend. Despite its minor similarities to other games of its type, the experience couldn't have been any more different, and the unique sanity meter system just seals the deal for this to be a horror title that you won't soon forget. I only regret that we'll never get to see a true sequel due to the company's untimely demise. And with that said, I am announcing the end of this channel. Yes, that's right. From this point forward, there will be no more gaming videos from JD Omnislash, and I will soon be deleting my channel for good. This can't be happening! And that's going to do it for this video. Let me know your thoughts on this game in the comments below, and have a happy Halloween. Take care.